Tell us, Shannon, for maybe folks who are here because they know me, but maybe newer to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey into becoming an author before we jump into this book.
Yeah, I'd love to. First of all, thank you, Josh, for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to talk to you again. It's very fun because we just officially met a month or two ago.
That's right.
Time is a little hazy for me right now. But yeah, that was a delight to get to meet you in person and then to be here with you today. So thank you. So yes, I will give a quick rundown of who I am and what I'm up to. My name is Shannon Martin. I've been writing on the internet for a long, long time, starting way back, 20 years ago. I was sort of one of the blog moms. I never referred to myself as that, by the way, but other people started to kind of lump us together in that category. And the reality is, I did start a little blog on Zanga. And then, if anybody here is old enough to remember Zanga, and then I moved over to, just a regular blog, and I wrote about my life living in a farmhouse. I had a very farm girl sort of aesthetic. That's how I was raised. I had little babies at the time. All of our children came to our family through adoption. And so I just kind of started it as a hobby. And over the years, I found that writing comes naturally to me. Writing is the way that I understand the world that I'm in. It's the way that I understand myself. And in many ways, it's the way I understand God. And so I sort of found my voice as a writer in those early years where there was no pressure on any of it. Thanks be to God. And 15 or so years ago, my family moved in from that farmhouse vibe, where we thought we were going to be forever. We moved into this much smaller home in what most people would consider to be sort of an under-resourced neighborhood. I see it as very abundantly resourced, and we can talk more about that if we want to. But moving into this neighborhood and being surrounded by the people that I'm now surrounded by in my life, it changed everything for me. And I know you and we have some common backstory, and so maybe we will kind of get into that a little bit more as well. But it was here in this neighborhood home in the city that I started to find my story. So, I found my voice in the country, I found my story in the city, and I started book writing very, it was a surprise to me. It was not something I set out to do. I went about it in a very traditional way. So at some point I realized I might like to write a book. So I found an agent and then I wrote a proposal. And, there are people that have these really miraculous stories about how they ended up book writing. That was not my story. It was very, very boring and traditional. And I did just publish this, my fourth my fourth book last week, 1 week ago today. And this book is called Counterweights, an essential practice for holding hope in a heavy world. And it's all about the idea of life throws a lot at us. We are asked to carry an awful lot. And some of those things are difficult and challenging, some of that heaviness that we are asked to carry and we can't put it down. And it serves us well if we can remember that we have this other side of the scale. If we picture our life as kind of a scale with all the hard, heavy things in one hand, we have this other side of the scale where we have a little bit more control. We can decide what we put onto that other side of the scale to sort of offset that heavy struggle. And I have come to see this other side of the scale as something that we can load up with heavy goodness. And so the idea here is not at all that these small and these moments of beauty or rest or delight or humor or honesty, they never can fully offset. They can never cancel out the hard things that we're asked to carry. But what they can do as we load up this side of the scale with heavy goodness, it can bring us just a little higher off the ground so that we can find our momentum and carry on. We can keep our heads above water. We can just keep going. And so that's basically the idea of counterweights, is that I am inviting us to give all of it our sacred attention. I am not a proponent of turning away from the things that are hard. I am a person who is very wired towards justice. And so, I take some exception to people right now who are saying, I'm not watching the news. I understand the impulse. I understand the urge to kind of close our eyes to that. But I think we really have a greater duty to each other. I think life and God, we're being invited into bearing witness to the things that are difficult and challenging. And I'm also here to remind us to be looking out for those little things that help keep us going, those counterweights, so that, we can't fight for a more just world if we can't get out of bed. It's sort of this idea of like we have to find a way to not just survive, but to really understand what it is that we still love about life. The things that we still love about our particular lives, even as it feels like in so many ways the world is burning down around us. So I'm basically saying let's hold both. Let's figure out how to hold both and how to carry both.
Wow. Wow. There's so much wisdom there to unpack, so much wisdom that you just dropped on us, Shannon. And I'm having so many thoughts and questions come up. But before I even go into my questions, I'll just say for anyone watching, if you have a question, if something came up for you as you heard Shannon share all that from her book Counterweights, go ahead and drop that in the chat, and we'll have time at the end where we'd love to get into those questions. So with that, Shannon, I love everything about what you just shared, and it's my second time hearing you say this because the first time was in an Uber ride with Zach Lambert, to Yale, where we had this
Mhm.
great conference time together. But yeah, and that's when I was like, oh my goodness, I need to have you on Masala Theology to unpack
Mhm.
this a bit further because what I think you're offering right now is really pastoral wisdom. It's really it's really good motherly advice for all of us right now in the church and even outside the church who love Jesus,
Mhm.
love justice, but just find ourselves being so disillusioned and so
Mhm.
weighted down by what we can't control. I'm curious for you, and I have a sense of where this may go because I've read the book and I see
Mhm.
recipes throughout it. I mean, this book is full of life, has gardening tips and like thrifting tips and just so much exciting wisdom here. But what is your counterweight? What are your counterweights in this season
Mhm.
of
Yeah.
despair for the world? Where do you find beauty and hope and joy to resist?
I would love to talk more about my counterweights. And first of all, Josh, I can't see you on video. Should I be able to see you on
Oh,
video?
it's showing for me,
Okay,
um, but let
it's
me.
fine. I just wanna
Okay,
make sure that we're locked in the way we wanna be. I'm just seeing your static picture.
weird, and it's been like this the whole
Maybe
time?
it has. Can other people I'm asking the crowd, can
Yeah,
you all see Joash?
yeah,
Can anybody can
do let us
anybody
know.
write a comment? Tech is so tricky.
This is
It's so
important.
tricky. Well, I thought, maybe for whatever reason he can't be live on video, and that's okay too. I'm happy to continue on either way.
Okay,
Um, anyone? Can anyone tell us?
folks are saying they
Okay.
can't. Uh,
I and I can't see I'm not seeing the chat anywhere, so I'm not
oh,
sure.
okay, so
It's
that's on
I
the
started
right.
to, and now it's kind of frozen for me. I'm not seeing anybody comment, but you're saying people
Interesting.
they can see you?
Yes, yes, people are saying
Okay.
they can see us both.
I wonder
Sorry,
why I
Shannon, that
can't.
you're
No,
not
that's
able
okay.
to.
That's
I'm happy
okay.
to
Okay.
monitor their chat, and maybe you can see me in the recording later. My goodness,
That's
so sorry.
great that everybody else could see you. So I'm so sorry to bring that into
No,
this conversation, but it felt important.
it's okay.
Okay. So we'll get back to it. What are my counterweights right now? It
Yes.
is we are in the very is today is the very last day of March. And I think this is one thing that I don't know that I fully this wasn't completely intentional as I was writing counterweights. I am very wired towards the seasons, and you probably picked up on that as you were reading. I tend to write from a very place-based perspective. I'm writing from the world that I am in. I'm writing from my home, my neighborhood, my garden, my community, these streets, these alleys, and from the seasons. And so you'll see that a lot through my writing. At this point, I don't know how to do anything different. That's just the way that it's going to be. But you'll notice sorry, where could I, whoop, there we go.
Yes, yes.
There's a peony on the cover of this book. That was sort of accidental. That was a very last minute decision when we were trying to find a cover for this book, and I'm so, so grateful because it's a perfect book cover. I adore it. And the very last chapter in Counterweights is about my peony. I have two peony bushes out in my small little city backyard. And I say all of that to say, right now as we speak, they're peeking their heads up through the soil, and peonies are a very fleeting flower. The bloom time is exceptionally short, especially in the zone where I live, way up in northern Indiana near the Michigan line. We're still going to probably have snow a couple more times. So spring just kind of fights for its life here. But watching those peonies emerge through the soil every year is one of my most important counterweights. And so it's like you get through these brutal winters and for me, I'm looking for life. We know life is always happening, even kind of in that understory and the undergrowth and the roots and in the bare limbs of these trees. But when we get to see it come into bloom, that's just it's a completely different, and honestly for me it's a better situation. So I
Wow.
keep looking out the window that faces my backyard and kind of peeking at them. They're not much to see yet, but it's a reminder to me that good things are always growing, and they've been working hard all winter. As we were buried in snow this winter, temperatures were brutally cold, and yet here they are. They're still coming back, and I find such peace in that. I find a lot of resilience and reminders that some things are always changing and some things are always staying the same. Those two, that sort of, this and this is two things are true at the same time. I find that I'm living my best life when I can hold to that. And so any reminder that multiple things are true at the same time, anywhere I find that sort of lived out around me in creation or in my life, that's something I hold on to. But I'm curious, Josh, you have read the book. You know enough about this concept and this practice. And that's just one little counterweight that I have. There are so many throughout every day. Do you have a counterweight or two that you would be willing to share?
Yeah, yeah, that's so kind, Shannon. And it's funny because I have to keep in mind now that you can't see me nodding along and being so excited about
That's
talking
okay.
about all this with you, but my goodness. But you know, so many thoughts come to mind. What comes to mind for me is, funnily enough, the afterword for my book, "The
Mm,
Justice of Jesus," that came out a few months ago, and in it, I talk. Oh, thank you. There you go.
of course.
Yeah. And in that book, the afterword focuses on Jeremiah chapter 29, verses
Mm,
4 to 5, right? Where God is telling through the prophet Jeremiah to a people in exile, a people under the boot of empire. God says to them, build houses and live in
mhm,
them, plant gardens and eat what they produce, right? And it's so interesting because I feel like,
mm,
I mean, I was just speaking at an event where someone this past Wednesday, where someone came up to me and said, I'm doing all these things to cultivate beauty, but I don't see that as resistance to empire. Uh,
mm.
and you know, it's right there in scripture. Like
Yeah,
this is resistance to empire. Planting gardens,
that's right.
eating right farm to table food. In my case, it's also then cooking butter chicken,
Yeah.
or cooking Indian food that keeps me connected with my identity. That is so much of how I cultivate beauty for myself. And
Mhm,
I also wrote this in a season of getting to know my my girlfriend, some status updates coming in the next few months. And she knows
Exciting.
this will be a surprise for her, right? but Krista is from a Mennonite background, and she's an Ignatian spiritual director, and she's a gardener too. And she has
Mhm.
taught me the beauty of gardening in this season. We literally planted some garlic cloves the other day, and then it snowed the next day, but we trust,
Mhm.
like, to your point, the garlic is doing its thing,
That's
the
right.
creation is doing its thing, and it'll come up right after the snow dissipates eventually here at some point in
Right.
Canada.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
you understand.
yeah. And then when it does come up, we'll eat farm to table food, and farm to
Yeah,
table Indian food, right? And there's something
yeah,
beautiful about doing that in a world that is so consumeristic and
yeah.
so deprived of its humanity and beauty, that exploits creation. This is a
Mhm.
beautiful, harmonious way of living with creation. And so I feel like I only stumbled into that in the afterword of my first book, but you've been leading into that for a while now, and I'm just really grateful for your wisdom on this
I
front,
love
Shannon.
that. Yeah, I love that. That's my favorite passage in all of Scripture. I keep
No way.
coming back to it. I was writing about it this very morning. So
Mm,
this little and I am most of the way through your book, but I have not gotten to the afterward yet. So this is a surprise to me, and it also does not surprise me in the least. And it's affirming and it's encouraging, and I love that we share that in common too.
yeah, yeah. No, no, my goodness. No, so great. Well, just switching gears a little bit here, Shannon, and I
Sure.
did tell this to you before we hopped on the live here, but yeah, I mean, this whole book is full of great wisdom and, reckoning with what we can't control that's broken in the world. Um, and it's full of beauty, like all the recipes and, 10 food bank donation needs and,
Yeah.
just things like that throughout the book. But probably my favorite part of the book, and this is just maybe favorite because it speaks to me with where I am spiritually right now in my wrestling is a whole chapter on Mary, which
Mhm.
I can't tell you how much I appreciated that. Especially someone, from our backgrounds, evangelical backgrounds,
Yeah.
uh, because I feel like when I first stumbled into Marian theology, I felt quite cheated by the evangelical church. Like I wasn't
Mhm.
exposed to this. I wasn't taught this. There's so
Right.
much beauty, and richness here, and I was just told, "It's too Catholic, don't go anywhere near it."
Right.
Uh, you know, but
100%.
yeah, yeah, and so I'm curious, one, what has your journey been
Mhm.
with Mary,
Yeah.
as a saint and as the Mother of God? And,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and then why throw in a whole chapter on Mary? This is so unique and is one of the things that I think makes this book so unique.
Yeah. I really when I set out to write it, the book in full, I wanted to be as honest as I possibly could be about the weights that I was carrying. Some of them are large and, things that we're all facing. Some of them are very small and personal to me. Some of them are sort of by proximity. I write about some of the weights that I'm feeling sort of as like a contact burn. I'm feeling the weight that other people are carrying, and I'm only feeling it to the extent that I am in community and in proximity with them, and it's not the same. And nevertheless, it's a weight. And I also wanted to be as honest as I possibly could be about my counterweights, the things that were visible to me in my ordinary everyday life, the things that were bringing me life and bringing me peace, and those things that we need, like I said, to keep going. Somewhere, I'll give you I'll make this as quick as possible because we could talk at length about a lot of these things. My mom grew up Catholic. And so by the time my dad grew up almost Amish. That's the easiest shorthand way to say it. A very conservative Anabaptist tradition called German Baptist. And when my parents got married, it was like a shock to everybody. These two people from these very different faith traditions, and together they sort of found their own third way, and that led us into, I had a very evangelical and even a eventually sort of a non-denominational charismatic background. My faith journey is vast. I've been a part of a lot of different traditions, but like you, I feel like I was given just a shred of the story of Mary, just the context. And for me, the context was always, and I wrote about this a little bit. She had long blonde hair, she had blue eyes, very pale skin, and she wore a light blue robe. And she was perfect, and she was chosen, and her whole role was to birth Jesus, the end. And that's really most of the context I was given on Mary. And with, like you said, this idea that worshiping Mary, of course, was to be feared, and it was like a 4 alarm emergency. Like, we just don't get too close to Mary because it's just a bad idea. Um, Years ago, several years ago, I mean, let's say 5 years ago, I was in a Goodwill store. I am an avid thrift store person, as you probably know by now.
Oh,
And I stumbled upon this little statue of Mary, this little ceramic statue, and I took a photo of it for whatever reason, and I put it back on the shelf, and I went home. And I could not stop thinking about this statue of Mary, and I didn't know why. I mean, it just sort of came out of left field. I ended up going back the next day, and I gave $2 to bring that Mary home. What intrigued me in part was that it had, the head of the statue had been broken off and glued back together. And I found that to be meaningful, that somebody had gone to the trouble. I don't know what had happened, but tragedy had befallen this statue of Mary, and somebody had gone to the trouble to glue it back together. And now there it was speaking to me. And in the months and in the years really that have passed since then, I am encountering these statues of Mary everywhere. They keep finding me, and so I just keep gathering them and bringing them home. I have a whole little collection now. I do think some evangelicals in my life find it to be very curious. And all I can say to that is I have slowly, and there's so much more that I want to learn, and I'm buying books that I haven't had time to read yet on, all that more. I just want more of Mary's story and Mary's theology and Mary's wisdom. But what I love is Mary's song in the that we hear in the Gospels. I forget which one. You probably know that. Is it
Luke.
Matthew?
I think it's Luke.
Luke.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds right.
Magnificat.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yes, the Magnificat, where she gives this very prophetic proclamation, this very subversive proclamation of who Jesus is and what Jesus will achieve in this world, and the empires that Jesus will bring down. I mean, it is like it gives me goosebumps even right now to think about it. And so
Mm,
this idea of Mary not just as a holy womb, but as a prophetess in her own right, a sort of a rebel rouser in
mm,
her own right. It speaks to me, it speaks to my soul, and it is a counterweight. It is a reminder to me that though women, through history and through scripture have sort of been sidelined and silenced, here we have this example of what it looks like to speak from our gut and to speak the truth in a way that will rattle the wealthy and the powerful. I'm just here for it. I'm here for it.
wow. Wow. That's so good. Thank you for sharing all of that. My
Yeah.
bishop, Chris Green, often says, we're so bad at loving the people that Jesus loved so well. We're so bad at caring about the people that Jesus deeply cared about.
Yeah.
And Mary would be top of the list, his mother.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, so much that could be said about the themes of justice there, but
Mhm.
I also know that the mystics would say you don't find the saints find you.
Oh,
Uh,
I love that. I feel that. I feel that. I'm gonna show my there's a little
yes.
there.
Yes.
That's my original Mary statue that a local letterpress artist made into these bookmarks for me. But that gives you an idea of what she looks
Wow.
like. You can see her little
Yeah.
the little line across her neck. She's beautiful. Yeah,
My
I love that
goodness.
idea. I love that idea of the saints finding us. It feels like that's what happened to me. And I know that that sounds probably wild to a lot of people, but I just know that it's true. And so yeah, I keep amassing this my collection and it's growing and I look at it every day. It's meaningful to me.
Yeah, yeah, and I almost wonder if what you're speaking to here, Shannon, is the loneliness that we wrestle with
Mm,
in this heavy world right now. And
yeah.
a counterweight to that loneliness is this communion of saints, right?
Yes.
That we have in the creeds that the global church holds to, but this communion of saints who are alive with Christ right now, and will be reunited with their bodies at the resurrection of their dead, but they're spiritually
Yeah.
alive with Christ right now, and if these folks are alive, and Shannon, if I could ask you to pray for me, because you're alive and on earth and in Christ, then I can also ask Mary, hey, would you throw up
Yeah.
a prayer to Jesus for me, right? And that's what
Yeah.
interceding with the saints is, right? Asking the saints to intercede for us. It gets mistaken as worshiping the saints.
Yeah.
But it was so beautiful to expand my theology to see that as as a valid form of prayer, just like I see praying in tongues as a valid form of prayer, right? And so,
Yeah.
yeah, my religious order, we have people who pray in tongues and people who pray the rosary, and people who do both, like
Yeah.
me.
Right.
And they're both
Yeah.
valid forms of prayer in the global Christian church. And so, so I love that you even threw in the rosary at the beginning of that chapter, the prayer, the rosary
Mhm.
prayer, and very much for
Mhm.
me too. I don't know about you, Shannon, but to me, Mary has seemed um, close to me, and making Jesus more accessible to me in seasons where Jesus has really felt distant, like in really
Yeah.
difficult seasons of life. I've had experiences of being in Europe and walking into these Marian masses, completely unplanned. They just happened to be having these Marian masses, and wrestling and feeling like God is so far away, and then having this picture of Mary essentially telling me, "Hey,
Mhm.
don't worry about it. Come over. Let me introduce you to my son,
Yeah.
Jesus." You know?
Yeah.
And that's I wonder if that's also the weight that you're offering a counterweight to when you go and
Yeah.
share your experiences with Mary there. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so much of my because I am a person of faith, a person of Christian faith, and I think this book can appeal to people outside of that
Mm,
faith tradition. But for me, it's that's who I am and that is my life. And so much of this idea of counterweights is rooted in this communal way. And like you're saying, I think Mary is inviting us into that. She's a living reminder of this idea of doing whatever to whatever extent we are able to help each other carry these weights. My husband Corey is the chaplain of our county jail. I work on staff in the kitchen at a community kitchen, and we're just surrounded by people who are carrying some really heavy things. And at the same time, we find these friends around us helping us to carry our heavy things. And it's such a beautiful reminder in a world that can feel pretty fractured and divided and lonely. And, a lot of us are wrestling through relationships changing, even loss of relationship, loss of belonging as we navigate some of these complexities. Um, I'm reminded over and over and over again of the real sort of root level, ground level counterweight of of staying close to the people around us, of being embedded in our communities, and of being radically honest in those communal spaces. And so I see all of those things in the story of Mary. So yeah, it's a lesson that I hope I continue to learn as I age and move through life.
Oh, that's so good. Thank you for that, Shannon. And I can't help but notice, like, even in the chapter progression of the book, I mean, you start with grief and lyrical lament, and you know, shadow boxing, expressing the rage a little bit, and then yeah, lament and longing, and you go, and then I feel like you're lifting our heads up a little bit. I'm really curious. I feel like there's an intentionality in
Mhm.
how you've
Yeah.
crafted the story and the progression of the journey you wanna take readers through. What was your heart in that journey of taking
Yeah.
readers through it? Yeah.
I think you're right about sort of I began the book with some of the heavier weights that I was carrying, some of the more personal heavy weights, which included sort of a mystery illness slash ailment that came upon me that I'm still dealing with. It included the loss of our church home of the past 13 or 14 years. It was devastating. Those two things sort of coincided almost at the same time. And so the book is sort of top loaded. And honestly, some of the political global heaviness that's bearing down on people, um, I just sort of went in with like complete honesty and just the sense of we're just going to dive in. We're going to name the weights. That is part of this counterweights practice, and that sort of distinguishes this practice from keeping a gratitude list or, like a joy list, or we have all different kinds of names for them. I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping a gratitude list. It's something I've done here and there throughout my life. I do, however, believe that it does not tell the whole story. I would be a proponent of naming both, keeping our eye on both the weights and the counterweights, and naming both the weights and the counterweights. I think there's real power in naming something with honesty, and that's something I've really learned from our friends who are coming out of incarceration, and our friends who are unhoused, our friends who are struggling in ways I have not. But the ability to just be very honest about the pain and the heaviness. I believe we can only counter what we are willing to first weigh.
Wow.
And so if we're gonna be picking up these gifts that our lives and creation and our communities are offering back to us that help us carry on, we have to first be willing to weigh the things that are hard. And so I do kind of move through the book with that progression. I wanted this to be a book that I write about some really heavy things, some things I have never talked about publicly. And I also wanted it to be this idea of like, oh, wow, that counterweight Shannon just wrote about is very odd and maybe kind of quirky and maybe just, seemingly like what? And that's what counterweights often are. They're just the little quirky personal things that we find that help us to carry on. And so the book itself is this picture of this both and. It's going to be a ride. It's going to be a wild ride where we're talking about some really heartfelt and heavy things. Many people have told me that various things, they all kind of point to different things made them cry.
Mhm.
But I also, to your point earlier, I wanted to provide little counterweights within the counterweights. So these are short chapters, and after each chapter, I give a list. I give one simple recipe in the book. I give things that are like this one is the one right by Mary. I have these lists here, and these are comfort foods that always help for me. And the thought in that is I wanna give the reader a chance to catch their breath, and I also want the reader to start to imagine what a counterweights practice can look like for them. For me and for you, it sounds like food is a really big deal
Yeah.
to us. I am a foodie. I also just, I'm not a fancy foodie, I just really like good food. And so it was a lot of fun for me to list down, like, what are my favorite go-to foods and and at the same time, navigate the weight that I work in a community kitchen where I get to help feed people who are food insecure. I just think life is so complex. And at the point that we try to sort of oversimplify it, we do ourselves an injustice. I really, really believe we can carry it all. We can carry the heaviness that increasingly people are falling into food insecurity, and what is our role there? What is our responsibility to each other? And also, I really like homemade mashed potatoes. That's something that's always going to make my day just a little bit better. And so I wanted to give the reader a real clear picture of what this practice might look like for them.
Wow. Wow. No, that is so good. Yeah, really appreciate those insights. And I think s- I think one of the things I appreciate so much about your voice, Shannon, is your vulnerability and your authenticity. Um, and I think it really you doing that and going there gives your reader permission to also do that for themselves and to go deeper and to really wrestle with what's going on, what's being stirred up. Um, I know that, something that you just said was that life is complex and our
Mm.
stories are complex. And, I want to go back to um, something you'd hit on earlier, which is even your own journey of wrestling through the complexities of life
Mm.
stories and seeing the beauty in different spaces, but also seeing the brokenness and the weights
Mhm.
and discerning for yourself, what is best for me, what gives me life, where do I need to be, and so both of us have journeyed from conservative Republican political
Mhm.
spaces to be where we are today, and we still have friends, we still have people, we
Yeah.
think of who've journeyed or not journeyed, but I'm curious for you, how does your journey of your own wrestling through your own story um, shape you as a writer, as
Yeah.
an author? And yeah, maybe connect the dots there for us a
Yeah.
little bit too.
I'd love to. I was delighted to hear that we share this background in common because
Yeah,
it's always nice to just encounter somebody who really understands it. I think a lot of people are intrigued by it, but not everybody understands it, and I really believe you do. I worked at the Heritage Foundation, and so that's a place that even up until a few years ago, most the average person did not know what that place was or what they did, and now a lot more of us know what the Heritage Foundation is up to. And I name drop them just for the simple point of context. I was working, and my husband was also he was working for a congressman on the Hill. We lived in Washington, D.C. for a short while before moving back into the district office for my husband. We were working in the most political spaces in the United States government. And that was a long time ago. That was, 20 years ago for us. We have we have changed quite dramatically. I don't know that it that we could have underwent more change when it comes to a lot of these areas. And in some ways that change felt slow and it felt incremental and it felt a little maybe hazy or just halting.
mm,
The thing that changed us initially was coming into proximity with people who looked and lived and believed differently than we ever had. We had both been raised in very homogenous conservative spaces, very white spaces. And as soon as we sort of made our exit out of some of that and into a richer and more complex and more diverse community, we started to understand that we were asking the wrong questions, that we needed to be asking harder questions.
mm,
We started to just do that process of interrogating this idea that we had both been raised in, like I said, these pretty evangelical spaces. We'd both been raised to believe that our faith informed everything else about our lives, and we just believed it. And now all of a sudden we were kind of questioning, like, wait, we still want this to be true. Our faith is still very important to us, but it's feeling like our faith is increasingly disconnected with how we're beginning to see the world. And it feels like some of this might be a bit fractured, a bit backwards. That's some of the tension I carry now. I want to be forever committed to allowing my faith to inform, for example, my politics. And I want to work hard to be consistent in that. And it's challenging to understand people around me, people I still love, who who believe they are doing the same and they're coming to a very different conclusion. You know, these are the complexities that community leads us into. Um, but yeah, I would just say at the point that I started to understand, and this is another reason why I included some of those lists and those things that feel a little more lighthearted. I think it's really important to do the work of knowing ourselves and and to believe that I already have permission. You already have permission to reconsider some things, to change your mind about some things. Somebody over this past week, during my book launch said, Shannon, I love that you give us permission to change our minds. And my response is, nobody gave me that kind of power. I do not have the amount of power it takes to give anybody permission for anything. But what I will do is remind us that we already have permission. And it can feel scary to change our minds. Ask me how I know. There a lot of times our belonging is attached to our certainty and to rigidly holding on to that certainty. As we sort of increase our courage and our resilience and our ability to let go of some of that certainty and think about things in a different way, it can feel really unsettling and scary. But what I know for sure is that it we will always find what we need to carry on, and as I have lost belonging in certain ways, I have gained belonging in other ways, and so, yeah, I think that's just part of the work here, to understand that we are allowed to long for things. We are allowed to know what we like and what we love and what we want, and, some of those ideas back in my childhood or even in early adulthood would have sounded very dangerous. And, like this idea of, that we were built wickedly almost, or maybe not built that way, but very soon after, we can't trust our bodies, we can't trust our gut, we can't trust our instinct. We should not be listening to allowing our five senses to lead us through this world. And yet, as I read the Gospels, I read stories of Jesus being led by his body, being led by his senses. We see over and over Jesus is heading in one direction, and then it will say Jesus heard, Jesus saw, Jesus felt, and his direction turns. And so I think that's a really beautiful reminder of us to be embodied, to be in this world, and to remember that as we're moving through this world and allowing it to soften us and change us, it's okay. We are allowed to make some U-turns.
Wow. Wow. That is so good, Shannon. I totally get the tension of um, in a hierarchy shaped world, people look at us as authority figures who need to give them permission.
Yeah,
And really, the work that we're engaged in is telling people, hey, talk to yourself, talk
yeah,
to your neighbor who
yes,
isn't as privileged as you are, like learn from community and learn from yourself and your own life experiences on the margins.
yeah,
And you're the only one who can do that for yourself. And I also love how you touched on certainty and belonging. My goodness, I mean, I think that resonates with so many of us who experienced a loss of community. Um, that was tied to a
yeah.
certainty around a certain set of things, um, even if it looked very different from the rest of the global church. But yeah, I appreciate how you yeah, weave those themes into the book and your voice as well. Shannon, uh, how like what's the best place for people to find you, your work,
Yeah.
uh, and where can people find your book, Counterweights?
Yeah. You can find counterweights wherever you find your books. It's available everywhere. The audiobook is also available, which I did read myself. So that's
Nice.
out there too. And then on the regular, you can find me here on Substack. I write every week on Substack. My Substack is called The Soup, and I write about a lot of these things that we've talked about today. And I'm also on Instagram and Threads most days, and you can find me there at Shannon Writes.
That's great. That's great. Shannon, thank you so much for making the time to hop on Masala Chai Theology to bless us with your presence and your wisdom. And just really excited for this book. It's so much needed right now. And so, yeah, go get your copy of Counterweights wherever you buy your books, and follow Shannon and her work and the incredible writing she does. But Shannon, blessings to you
Yeah, you
and
too.
to the doors that this book will open for yourself and for this world that needs it so badly.
I so appreciate it. It's such an honor to be here with you and your community, and I'm just so glad that we're friends now. I'm glad we've got to meet.
Same, Shannon. Blessings to you today. Have a great day.